because so many of y'all had a lot of questions on my off-grid system that I got set up, I had to bring in my buds Jesse and Carl here from NC Solar Now to help me answer all these questions, because honestly, I don't know all of them. And they actually helped me decide on what I was going to do in the first place. And so with that being said, I'll answer a bunch of questions that you may have. And if you stick around to the very end, hopefully you got a lot of your questions answered. First question I got asked is, what happens if I actually have to replace my shingles on my roof now that I got all these solar panels on them?
Yeah, so the good news is these panels can be fully removed. We actually look at the roof to make sure that the panels are going to go on a surface that is okay for at least 10 years before we actually install. If we do need to remove the panels to replace the shingles, that's fine. But typically, these panels are going to shade that entire roof area and create a longer lasting shingle because they're not going to be impacted from the sun and the rain. So they'll last a lot longer than just a traditional shingle sitting out in the sun.
And I actually didn't even realize that until they were starting to put the solar panels on. I realized then, before they ever said anything, that the actual shingle itself is protected more. So I'm really not concerned about the life of my roof. I will tell you that too. I want to say, now I'm not hearing this from them. I want to say that most insurance companies may require your roof life to be a certain age before doing that, and maybe they can answer that.
I'll speak to that. That's why you want to go with a reputable installer who's going to give you good advice. We never recommend that our customers install on a extremely aged roof surface. There are credits that can be claimed for the area underneath the solar panel, so you can actually get a reduced price for re-roofing that area. And insurance companies at this point are fully aware of solar systems. We do plenty of insurance claims that are covered by insurance money to remove and reinstall solar systems on roofs that also have insurance claims. That's a very common part of our business practice nowadays.
So of course, everybody wants to know really and truly what I paid for this entire system that I've got, because a lot of people hear about how expensive it is, and yes, it's expensive. I wish these guys would have just given it to me, but that's not the case. They didn't even cut me a discount, so I want to make sure everything's transparent on all this. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background first, they didn't reach out to me. I actually reached out to them. Had several solar panel companies trying to sell me stuff, knocking at the door, and these guys could answer every question, where I could not get questions answered very transparently from other people. And that's a lot of the reason why I went with them. Having said all that, the original cost that I thought I was going to pay was about $35,000. Now, when you go into it a little bit further, you realize all these places that are trying to sell you this stuff is really trying to get you the cheapest price, in my opinion, to get you to say yes. But if you're trying to truly eliminate your bill, you need to get, you need to compare apples to apples on what your actual bill is. When I started doing all that, and I decided to go with a battery system to make sure I had a generator on go all the time, it come out to be $47,000. Now, having said all that, I'm going to let my buddy Jesse explain why it was $47,000, if he can do that. But the other side of it is he's going to tell you what it's really going to cost me, and not $47,000. So take it away, bud.
The nice part about these systems is you do start at that $47,000 total, and that includes all of your design, engineering, permitting, installation. That's your solar panels, your battery, your inverter. So all of your components, everything turnkey installed. So after we're done, basically he can just turn this system on and rock and roll. Then he can file next year for a federal tax credit of 30% plus a Duke Energy rebate of $9,000. So that brings him all the way from $47,000 down to $23,000 for his net investment. And this system is going to return itself in about 4 years. Not to mention you get additional monthly credits just from having a battery on your house. That comes directly from the utility company. So all in all, after that 4-year time, you're literally producing power for the rest of your life at no cost.
I want to kind of elaborate more on that too. So he's not getting into the weeds of it, but I will essentially be getting like a $55 credit from Duke Energy here in North Carolina. So if you're watching it from some other state, I don't know that it applies to you, or if Duke's there. You may have your own incentives. But another thing that he did not really go into detail on it, but I found out later, was that federal tax credit is really a bank of money.
It's important to understand that your federal tax credit can be claimed over 5 years, meaning if you don't have the full tax liability in the first year after installing your system, you can defer that tax credit over the next couple of years until you fully recouped that investment cost.
This is called a non-refundable carry forward credit. So like Carl said, you have the ability, if you don't have that liability in 1 year, to carry that credit forward until you recoup your entire tax credit.
So another question I got asked was, how do I have an off-grid system? Because a lot of people actually think that they can't go off-grid, and technically, I'm not really off-grid. I want to be fully transparent. However, I can actually flip the switch and run just off my Tesla Powerwall and all these solar panels. There is one catch, and the catch is I still have to be connected to the grid because Duke Energy is going to make sure I have to pay a meter fee regardless. That's pretty much what I know. Maybe Carl wants to say a little bit more.
So it's important to understand that this system can function totally independently without using electricity from the utility company. It still has an electrical connection back to the utility company. So we've kind of flipped the roles here in that normally you have a backup generator in place to support you if the grid goes down. In our scenario, we now have a grid to support us in case we're maybe not making enough solar energy on a cloudy day, or in case we have heavy load for a couple of weeks. The important thing to understand is that this system can be physically turned off and disconnected from the utility grid, and his whole house can still be powered, including every single load, all the lights, all of his electronics, all of his HVAC units, and everything. He will have to pay attention to how he's using his energy if he wants to run for an extended period of time off the grid, but this system can fully support this house without using any energy from the utility grid.
So with that said, that's what I was telling you about earlier when we were looking at how much this whole system was going to cost me. Originally, I said it was going to be around 35, but in order to be able to fully function without having extra power having to be supported from Duke Energy, I had to increase the amount of solar panels, and that's why the cost went up. So you decided to get the solar panels, and now you're worried about having to replace your roof, and you think it's going to be extra cost now that you got solar panels on there. And yes, the quick answer is there is extra cost to having to remove those and get shingles on there, but they'll answer a lot more about that.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, we try to make sure that the roof that we're installing on has at least a decade worth of life, if not more, to ensure that we don't have to remove and replace them in a short period of time. But if you do need to remove and replace them, the cost ranges from anywhere from about $150 to $200 a panel to remove them, re-roof, and then actually reinstall those panels. Now, a lot of times what our customers do is they'll go with their insurance company when they first install the system, and they'll request to have these underneath their policy. That way, if there is damage or there is a problem over the time, they can actually just take those panels off and include it in that roof replacement cost. So they just have to pay their deductible. They get the removal and reinstall at no cost, as well as the roof replacement.
So if you're watching it from another state, someone mentioned in my video earlier that some battery generation solar panel systems are not really acceptable. And so I don't know anything about that either.
I can speak to that for North Carolina. There are no state laws preventing you from installing solar or battery backup systems. And to further address that, I have customers with fully off-grid systems to where their homes are not connected to any utility company, as well as many systems under different EMCs and utility companies, Duke Energy, Dominion, down at the coast, that have battery and solar systems on it. So there are no rules or laws preventing us from installing solar or battery systems anywhere in North Carolina, to my knowledge.
So one other person mentioned that they had heard of the fact that the power company would actually owe me money, and they actually can.
Yeah, so in some states, power companies will take your power and they're not going to give you anything for it. Here in North Carolina, you get a 1-for-1 credit on your bill. And based on the current incentives, you can actually accumulate credits from your battery control incentive. And at the end of the year, if you've accumulated credits and you've got them in your bank, you can just call them. They'll write you a check for the remaining balance.
It's important to know that this is a incentive program through the utility company. So it does have a limited time and it has a capacity to it. It's expected to last for the next 3 years. I also wanted to make the statement that it's very important that you are using a trusted installer who can accurately answer these questions. It's important to know that some of these answers are specific to our situation here, and yours might be slightly different, and you need to be able to trust your solar installer to give you accurate and truthful information about what to expect with your relationship between your solar company and your solar panels and the utility company and how that all works.
So my biggest concern whenever I was paying for all this stuff in the first place was what happens if something really goes wrong? And a lot of you said, well, what happens if you have a roof leak? And how long do the panels last? And all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to let them explain to you what's going to happen when I call them and say, hey, my roof is leaking. I'm not saying it is yet. I'm just saying, what are they going to say? Or what are they going to do?
So we've been doing this for a long time, about 15 years, and we've obviously found the best possible components to use for the roof flashings, which are the place where the rails will be mounted to the roof surface. And we use something called a compression flashing. The reason that we use that is because it's the only underwater tested flashing. So a third party called Intertech tests that flashing and submerges it for 6 days to ensure no leaks. So there's no other mechanical flashing on the market that can actually do that. You can deal with wind-blown rain from the other flashings because they're not actually sealed down to the roof surface. They don't bond with the existing shingle like the ones that we use do. Now, we offer a lifetime warranty because of that component that we use, and we have a $5 million insurance policy that covers us because of using that specialty equipment.
NC Solar now has a full service department dedicated to making sure that our systems are maintained and kept functional. It's important to have a relationship with your installer and to know that they will be there to support you for the coming years. Not that problems are going to happen, but if they do happen, you want someone that you can rely on to come back and make sure your system's maintained and continues making the power that you need to offset your consumption from the utility or to back you up in the event of a grid outage.
I want to add to this too, because when I started looking into all this stuff, one person that lives right down the road from me, when I literally picked up the phone and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this solar. What do I need to know?" They said, "Well, hey, if I could do it again, I would, but I got one problem. The solar company is no longer in business," and that was like the number one talk I had with Jesse when we first started this whole process. I was like, I really want to do this. I really want to make videos on it. I really want to explain all this stuff to people because there's a lot of people that are not aware of all the incentives out there to make it as cheap as possible, because it's actually cheapest now to ever do it, to have solar and try to go off grid. And that's what many people talk about. If you go look at bad stuff on the internet about complications with it, you can find reviews saying, well, I can't get a hold of the company that installed it because they're not there no more. NC Solar's been around for 15 years, and surprisingly, they've answered every call that I have actually reached out with them about. So I'll give them kudos to that.
It's important that you partner with a trusted local company. NC Solar now is established right here in North Carolina. We only operate in this state. The company's comprised of local people from our local universities. So, we're not funded by any outside state or nationality. We're a locally grown, homegrown company here operating in North Carolina, and we plan to be here.
One other question someone asked was, well, you got your solar panel stuff set up now. Does it void your home warranty?
Yeah, so real interesting about that. Wherever we install the panels, right, we're going to take over that whole area within 1 foot of the installation for your roof coverage, and we cover that for the lifetime of the system. Now, any other home warranty, these panels aren't going to affect anything that's electrical because this is electrically inspected by the state. Same thing with all the building code requirements. This is a professionally engineered stamped design binder. So all of this has to go through the proper documentation and departments before it will be installed. So it's all going to be congruent with the homeowner's warranty requirements.
So you're trying to decide whether or not you want to do solar in the first place, but more importantly, you're probably wondering, how long does this process even take?
Yeah, so the nice part about this is we do have a very defined process, and it's typically between 10 and 12 weeks from the day you decide to move forward. We come out, we do a full on-site survey. We're going to look at your electrical system, look at your roof. We're going to make sure everything's good for the installation. If anything needs to change on the electrical side, we can send that to our engineer. He can analyze it, and then we get back to you right away. Then we'll create a full design. We'll go ahead and submit that to the engineer for a stamp. We move into the permitting process, and then we'll go ahead and order your equipment after that. Once that's finished, we got your equipment, we're ready to go. We can schedule your installation. We bring our crew out. Typically, it's a 2-day install with a backup storage system like a Tesla Powerwall 3. And we'll go ahead, send out the team to start your electrical side. And then today, they're actually setting the panels on the roof.
So probably now that you've heard everything and you know how much I paid for this whole system, you're probably wondering how in the world I'm actually paying for it. Did I finance it or did I pay cash for it because you think I have all these followers and I can afford all that stuff? That's really not the case for me. I decided to look at every option very closely. If you want to know the truth, my power bill was about $260 this past month. And when we looked at all the financing options that I looked at was basically, would my payment be less than my current utility payment? So when we did all that, compared to apples to apples, it was $220 a month from what I remember to just set it up on installment. So it was actually cheaper than what I paid last month. Having said that, whenever I started looking at how much I was going to end up paying in the long run, I decided to go with 2 years, no interest.
So when we first started doing this, there was not a whole lot of options in the solar finance game. A lot of companies have come on board, and we go with companies that have been around for a long time that also have a large financial backing. And currently we're working with a credit union that offers anywhere from 5, 10, 20-year loans at varying interest rates. And it all just depends on what the client's goal is. If they want to pay the system off early, if they plan on paying it off for the full term. But the nice part is you don't just have to pick one option. You can go with, like Colin said, 24 months with no interest, no payments. The nice part about that is you can recoup all your credits. You can get your rebate back, you can get your tax credit back in that period of time, and then you just have your net balance left to satisfy. Then there's other options where you can make monthly installments or payments over time that will actually reduce as your credits come in. You can take those credits, give them to the bank, and then your payment amount will drop. You can re-amortize the loan up to 3 times during the loan period. So you have plenty of options. And then, of course, there's good old cash. If you just want to go with a cash payment, it's broken up into 3 installments, one for a deposit, one when you order your equipment, and then finally the balance after your system's installed and inspected.
I know that's a lot to take in. I will tell you that someone also asked, what did I have to pay up front? And I wrote them a check for $7,000 before we ever started all this. But I think a lot of that was based off the size of my system. Maybe he can elaborate a little bit more on why I had to pay that.
Yes. So in Colin's particular case, his loan was limited to a $40,000 total. So his was 47. He had to write that $7,000 check. But otherwise, if you're, sub 40,000, then there's no down payment required if you're going with a financing option. If you're going with a term loan, there's not a limit. So 10 or 20-year loans, there's no limit on your total amount. It goes up to, I think, $100,000 right now. So there's no down payment required. There's no payments for 6 months. So you don't take anything out of pocket for 6 months, and then your payment will begin at that time.
And one other thing, too, I want to elaborate on. I didn't have to pay any of this money until we got approval for all the incentives, rebates, and everything else. All that stuff really had to be in line before I ever owed them any money. So they did a lot of work before I really paid them any money.
That's right. And so we're confident in the capacity of this current rebate program. And so we were willing to stick our neck out and make sure Colin was approved for that full rebate check before he had to come out of pocket with anything.
So you spend all this money, and now you're worried about if a solar panel is going to break. What's the cost of it and all that mess? I actually asked them before all this, how durable are those solar panels? And so what happens if something bad happens because of a storm? Well, we'll find out.
So the warranties have gotten incredible over the past 5 years, really, as manufacturing technology has become more and more automated. So the failure rate for some of these tier 1 panels is 1 in 10,000 modules. And they actually degrade slower than any panels on the market currently, the ones that we're putting on Colin's house. and that's a degradation rate of 0.25 or 0.25% per year, right? So when he gets to year 25, this panel will still be at 92% of its original efficiency. Now, the structure of the panel, the frame, the glass, the backsheet, and the cells, that's all covered for 25 years as well. So any issues with delamination, that sort of thing is going to come back and they're going to exchange that panel if there's a problem. Now, in terms of replacement, all of our labor warranties are going to be congruent with the manufacturer's labor replacement warranty. And in a lot of cases, it's 25 years as well. And it just depends on the particular product. But these are solid tier 1 Bloomberg rated modules that we use. That's the only products that we use. And we want to make sure they're going to last for the lifetime of the house.
Regarding the construction of the solar panels, they are built out of aluminum frames with a low lead tempered anodized glass on the front to help with the light absorption. They're rated for 115 pounds of push pressure and 75 pounds of pull pressure, 140 mile-an-hour wind loading. Put as simply as possible, a solar panel can almost withstand the weight of a person standing on it. It's not good for the panel, but it would take that weight and not break. I wouldn't recommend doing that.
So if you stuck around long enough to hear all those questions being answered, here is what my system actually looks like. And Carl here is going to explain this whole setup and how it works here so you can better understand it.
So I'm going to do a real quick rundown of what's going on here. So here we have the power coming in from the utility company to the meter base. This is where the utility company is going to read how much energy the house is using or how much energy the house is pushing back to the utility company for certain points of the day. Here we have the transfer switch. So a lot of you are probably familiar with generator backups. This is the same exact concept. This is a 200 amp transfer switch. In our case, this transfer switch is disconnecting the utility company and letting our solar system come on right here. If we look further down the wall, we can see the power wall over here.
Yep, right there.
So the power wall, this is the battery and inverter. So this houses all of the electronics and the computer and the brains of the whole system. So here's where we're converting DC energy from the solar panels on the roof into AC energy that the house can use, as well as storing and giving and taking the DC energy as we need to if the house were to be off grid. This unit would be providing the whole power to the whole house so that he can keep running things. And then if we look, we have the power. We try to keep our lines running as nice as possible. We'll have them painted when we're done, and we run up, and there's where we see the connection going up to the roof to where the solar panels are.
And then if you look, it comes straight from down there all the way back to the gateway here.
And we have our safety switch for first responders in case anything ever went wrong. Here's where we come to turn the system off and shut it down.
So if I wanted to go off grid, what do I do?
So in this case, there's actually multiple ways to do it. We can do it electronically through an app. So he can actually go into his app and click, hey, disconnect my house from the utility company. Or he can physically come out here and turn off the main breaker feeding the house and physically disconnect the house from the utility grid. So if we wanted to, we could go ahead and click this off and say, hey, we're going off grid, and shut the whole connection to the utility company and run off solar and batteries.
So I did not know I could actually do that on the app as well. And by the way, my whole system is monitored on the Tesla app. So the Tesla app does more than cars, okay? So, and I did not know that. So you can go and sync every Tesla device under the same Tesla app. So this is all new to me, but pretty cool stuff.